Good morning and welcome to WNHH-FM's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Erick Russell makes New Haven tick. He's a New Haven-born and bred attorney. He won 4 legal awards in just the last 6 months, and he's just getting started. He's also dived into community work as well and serves as a leader on the LGBT section of the Connecticut Bar Association. He's here in the studio to tell us all about that. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Russell.
Thanks for having me.
What a pleasure to see you. And thanks to New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So you're only 30, you told me when you came in.
I am.
And when we first saw you in the pages of the Independent, was 2010, I believe. The West Haven Coalition gave you a college scholarship. You were still, I guess you were at UConn then? Or?
It was University of New Haven.
University of New Haven. And you a local guy about to make good. And then we watched you over the years kind of pop up in the back of photos at political events and then getting promoted at the law firm and all sorts of good stuff.
Everything's going well.
Let me ask you about these awards just real quickly.
Sure.
Super Lawyers Connecticut Rising Stars. You got that on October 17th. Who puts that out?
So Super Lawyers is a magazine that they issue every year. So they rank lawyers all across the country and then individual states.
And how do they rank them? Like based on what?
I think it's just your production. I think they track law firms and lawyers and just what they're doing as a whole.
And do you go get some kind of plaque? You already have like a part of your house where you get awards that kind of gather dust.
I do not. I'm good. I'm not very good with that.
Good. That's good. I know one guy in politics, when he wasn't doing well, his wife would pull him into the den where there were 5,000 awards, but that wouldn't, help him get past whatever was going on that day. And then you got Graduates of the Last Decade Impact Award from UConn Alumni Association, October 15th.
Yeah, that was very nice. It was.
So you went to UConn Law School?
I did.
Was Jeremy Paul the dean then?
Yes.
He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
He's that Northeastern now. Yeah.
Yep. So that was very nice. It was very nice to be recognized by the law school. I had such a great experience there and made a lot of friends that I'm still very close to today. So always nice to be recognized by people that you work with and that you've gone to school with and kind of been in the trenches with.
And is there a network the way there is at Yale Law School where we kind of help each other out?
There is. The Alumni Association is very active in Connecticut and New York and the Boston area. Obviously, I think how we branch out a little bit less than Yale does. But
you don't all go on the Supreme Court.
We don't all.
Or the secret society that really run the states.
But there are many of us in the Supreme Court, including Justice McDonald, who's one of the recent
State Supreme Court. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And do you see a role as an alumnus, Erick? Do you feel like you're going to help make a path for young people in New Haven who might want to pursue a career in the law and maybe take advantage of UConn?
I would love to. I think it's one of the things that really drives a lot of my involvement is making sure that people, I think especially from New Haven and from poorer and communities and from people of color, to know that there's a path to practicing. It's a huge issue in the legal field right now, the lack of diversity.
What was it like at UConn? Was there diversity? Had things changed over the years? Did they know how to deal with people who came from different backgrounds?
There was diversity. It was certainly not what the numbers that people would like to see. And I think it kind of went in waves depending on that class year. My class for black lawyers was very small for graduates.
Like how many?
I think it was one of 3 or 4 in my graduation. 150.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was, and I think it's really important to have these.
So what was that like? Like, tell me about a day at law school where it was either a problem, where you said it's not a problem.
No, it wasn't a problem. I think at UConn there was a very friendly environment, and all of our students kind of worked really closely together. I think where it would emerge often was in law school classes when we were having discussions around issues that involved race.
Like civil rights law?
Correct. Or like constitutional, when talking about affirmative action, or you're talking about in criminal law having conversations around
who gets locked up,
but a specific fact set that
Give me an example of one discussion in class one day.
Yeah, so criminal law, I don't remember the exact case, but there was a case that kind of tied back to there were individuals on a train, and there was, I don't remember if it was an attempted robbery or something like that, but the response after in looking at the facts, the race clearly played a role in how the law was interpreted and how this played out. And it was interesting as I was kind of sitting back and you hear this discussion around these issues, and no one really wanted to touch the race piece to it.
And were you the only black guy in the class?
I was. And then so at some point, that conversation shifts over to race, and you're left to everyone looks to you to be the voice for the
That's what I hear a lot about.
community.
Like, on the one hand, when people of color are such a small percentage in academic settings, sometimes I hear, people are talking about us, but they don't take into seriously our lived experience. But that on the other hand, you get turned to speak for an entire race and entire people's experience. So how is that navigated by you and by the room?
It's challenging because I don't have the same experience as every black person that I know or every member of my family, and but I think it's important to have people in the room who can at least bring up that perspective, because oftentimes people.
Did you feel a weight on your shoulders? Like, I'm going to explain this to people?
Totally.
So what did you say in that discussion?
I think that happens often. I think whether it's talking about a specific issue or in many settings when I'm the only minority in the room, you realize that you're representing more than just yourself. And I think most minorities
big weight to carry.
Yeah, but it's a challenge that I think is important. I enjoy it. I think it's how we also make sure that we're bringing people up and making sure people behind us have opportunities, and you're kind of paving the way for other people to the extent you can.
Can you think of an example where you did speak up at UConn and it made a difference?
I think it happens all the time. I think just by being in those settings and doing good work and representing your community well, that it changes perspectives for a lot of people. I mean, I often forget, and I think especially here in New Haven, right? We are an incredibly diverse community, a bunch of different backgrounds and perspectives and thoughts, and there's so many people that do not grow up in settings like that. And that was really apparent to me in law school when, some of my closest friends, you would realize that their perspective and their experience is so totally different than yours. And that by you kind of being involved and engaging with them, changing minds in a lot of ways.
All right. And then you got Erick Russell, you got Fairfield County Business Journal's 40 Under 40 on June 11th. So that means 40 lawyers who are under 40 who stood out. So that's not about race, that's about generation.
Correct. I think that's not specific to lawyers. So it was actually a really cool experience because there were a lot of young leaders in a variety of different areas in industry in Fairfield County as a whole. Our firm my main office based in Bridgeport.
That's why you were Fairfield County, even though we know you're New Haven.
Yeah.
You live in New Haven, you grew up in New Haven.
I was expecting that question.
For one night. Yeah. So what was that like? You had some kind of dinner? Was the food decent?
It was a cocktail reception and apps, and but it was really cool to learn about what so many other young folks in the state are doing. And
tell me about someone you met that night who wasn't a lawyer, who you were glad you met because you were at this 40 Under 40 guy.
Yep, I'm gonna blank on her name, but there was really interesting woman from Stanford, and her big thing was bringing tech industry to Connecticut, and we had a lot of conversation, I guess, tied a little bit more to some of my political involvement, but just about how to bring some attention to attracting tech here and knowing that there are resources and that the state is supporting small businesses and tech industry and coming here. So
and I do want to talk about generational change in a few minutes. I just want to get through all your 4 awards you've won just since May. In May, you got the George W. Crawford Black Bar Association's inaugural Rising Star Award. And I'm told that's the one you're proudest of. George W. Crawford was the first Black Corporation Counsel meeting top city lawyer in New Haven. He served under Dick Lee.
He was
the redevelopment mayor half a century ago. There's now a public housing development named after him on Park Street. Why were you proudest of that, and what was that?
I'm hesitant to say proudest just because it was an incredible honor with all the awards that I've received. But Crawford for me was very personal. I was on the board of directors of Crawford a few years back.
What is Crawford?
So the Crawford Black Bar Association, and was involved. They were a huge resource to me and then other Black law students when I was in law school. And
is it a statewide group, Erick?
It is. City? It is, and it's completely run by Black lawyers in the state. And it's just an incredible organization.
And have you met mentors? Crawford's dead, I believe. Have you met attorneys who are older, kind of
many?
Giving you some good advice about.
So our current corporation counsel is
John Rose,
very involved in Crawford.
Who probably, I'm sure, knew Crawford because he was involved here during Model City days.
He did, and Justice Luby Harper, and many others. So for me, it was all about an organization and being honored by an organization made up of my peers that some of my closest friends I've made through Crawford. And like I said, they've been a huge resource to me professionally as well. And the organization just stands for a lot of what I believe in. It's
Now,
about
is a big part of it, Eric, sharing stories, what it's like? So for some solidarity and help in navigating it, or is it more like advice on how to succeed?
it's all of that. And a lot of it is mentoring law students and being out there and getting.
So do you do that?
I do. It's a passion of mine. Again,
So tell me about that.
It's so Crawford has mentoring organizations, and there are a lot of other diversity and inclusion organizations that I've been involved with in the state. There's a Lawyers Collaborative for Diversity. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the Connecticut Bar Association is very active. And all of these organizations are about making sure that other diverse students and law students have the resources and support that they need and have the information they need to be successful. I didn't have that growing up. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I didn't grow up around lawyers. I didn't see other lawyers that looked like me. So until I was really in that setting, Crawford and other kind of professionals in the area, that's what gave me the base that I needed to thrive.
So what kind of, tell me about it, mentoring you're doing now? Whom do you meet with as a student? When?
Yeah, so there are many. A few, I guess some of my closest mentees right now are individuals that are just graduated from law school and are starting. Ashley McWilliams is one of them. She's a recent UConn law grad and just started. And, you know, she's from New Haven. I've been in touch with her throughout her process. But it's really a lot of that informal mentoring and advice. And
what's the biggest piece of advice you give? What's the big takeaway they get from meeting with Erick Russell?
I think it depends on where
what
they are in their career.
What did Ashley learn from you?
Yeah, I think kind of making space for yourself and knowing that you're right where you're supposed to be.
We all feel that often in life, that we're kind of a hoax.
It's hard.
I don't know about the race thing, but for me, I know it's often a hoax. Like I'm not really qualified to be where I am, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and we hold ourselves back with that. I mean, I knew when I started law school, the one thing I knew I did not want to do was go to a law firm. And most of that was because I didn't think that I was ever going to be comfortable in a setting like that. And I didn't know if there was a place for me. And obviously my experience has been very different because I've been with Pullman my entire career. But, you know, I think sometimes we get in our own way, and it's important to know that, you know, you have
and to see someone
Yes.
who is comfortable and successful.
Correct.
And we're talking about that with Erick Russell, New Haven lawyer on the rise, 4 awards in the last few months about the work he's doing in law. He's also very involved in community stuff and mentoring citywide, statewide. He's part of generational change in New Haven. So tell me about that, Erick Russell. You work for Pullman and Conley, one of the big law firms in the state. How many lawyers they have?
We're just under 100 lawyers.
And they're based in Bridgeport.
Yep.
And what kind of law? How do you go there every day? You kind of go on the Merit? Or?
Yeah, so I just moved recently in the city, so I'm pretty close to the Merit now. I used to
be 95 from City
I used
Point.
to be 95, yeah. So, and I split time. I'm actually in our Hartford office about half the time.
So you drive a lot?
I do drive a lot. Between that and my role at the state party, it keeps me on the road quite a bit.
And so what kind of law do you do?
I'm in our government finance group, so I do a lot of work representing cities, towns, state agencies in financing projects, mostly public use projects or private-public
That's good information
partnerships.
to know. So you know, like what it takes to involve to float a bond and get a good rate if you're going to do a sewage treatment plant upgrade or something.
Yeah, so we do a lot of bond work, and then some economic development work, things like that.
And are you friendly with the state treasurer?
Sean Worden is great. He's been doing a fantastic
because he
job.
did that. Didn't he do that kind of work in law before
He did. He was so he worked at a firm up in Hartford doing a lot of public finance work as well.
And are you looking into doing that, maybe being state treasurer one
day? That is not on my radar, but.
So now, why you said you didn't think you'd work at a law firm? You didn't think you'd fit at a law firm or feel comfortable there. A lot of people go to law school saying, you know, I can go into politics, which you might, you know, you kind of are, or go into public interest law. What steered you to a destination you didn't think would be your destination? So
my background, I went to school for criminal justice, and I had spent some time interning at the state's attorney's office.
Which office?
It was in the Milford Antonio office.
That must have been eye-opening.
It was great. It was a great experience, and it really got to see how the process worked. I met a lot of really strong lawyers on both sides of these issues, and it really kind of opened my eyes to things that I saw wrong. I think on both sides of the criminal justice process.
For instance,
just the number of Black and brown people coming in versus any other group, and the challenges with people being able to afford lawyers. And
well, it's moved now to get rid of cash bail as well.
correct.
Yep. And that's always big financial. But it's interesting. Do you have the experience I do when you meet people at each level? Let's say state's attorney, public defender, cop, bondsman, judge, and at each level, everyone knows what you just talked about is wrong. But you can understand why the person is making the decision she or he makes every day that contributes to the perpetuation of that reality.
Correct. No, it's a really tough challenge. I mean, and I think especially when you talk about things that really just need structural, overhaul.
And was structural overhaul on your mind when you decided to study criminal justice? You say, I want to go into this to make the system better?
I can't say that. I mean, I think that sparked my interest as I was in law school, and it's part of the reason. I mean, when I was in undergrad studying criminal justice, and it's part of the reason why I've been involved in politics a little bit since then, was because I went to school expecting to go into law enforcement in some capacity.
You mean be a cop? Not a cop, but a prosecutor?
No, I was, so again, being the first person in my family to go to college, I knew I wanted to go to law school. I just didn't know how realistic that was. And I wanted to have a very practical career path. And I was always, my family owned a small grocery and deli in New Haven.
Which one?
It was called Fast Food Deli. We were on Congress and Redfield there. And
still around?
It's still there. My parents don't own it anymore. We sold that. My parents left there in 2001, I believe, and then we opened another small grocery and deli on Dixwell Avenue in New Haven, and we're there until I started law school. But with the store, we had, again, I didn't grow up in a political family, but I look back on it now, and my family was very community engaged, and the store was kind of a hub for a lot of people. But we had a great relationship with the community, and we had a great relationship with the police that worked in the area, and I got to see a lot of the good that they did as well. And I knew I wanted to give back to my community and somehow, and that.
So you meet cops hanging out the store. Were you working at the store at 12?
Always. At about
What'd you do?
8 or 9 years old. Everything. Worked in the deli and did the cash register and stock shelves and all
Great experience.
It was great. I learned so much.
And so you got to know cops in the Hill.
I did, yeah. And it was, we had a great relationship with law enforcement. And for me, it was a learning experience. It was a way, and the other piece of that is oftentimes, again, underrepresentation. I didn't see many cops that looked like me or that were actually from the community.
So you said I might become a cop.
So I thought that was a way for me to contribute. And when I was in college, I had a professor of mine, just to get back to kind of the structural reform or my interest in that. He was a state rep from East Haven, Mike Lawler. And at the time, there was a bill up to abolish the death penalty. And I had taken some interest in this in our coursework. And so Mike invited myself and a few other students to go up to the Capitol to kind of see this going on. And it was my first introduction to state politics. And I got there and I realized this is where things actually happen that impact so much of what goes on in our communities.
And you were at UConn then?
This was when I was at UNH in undergrad. Okay. So that's,
Oh, and UNH has the criminal justice program.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was, so that really sparked my interest in more of the policy piece, and knowing that in order to make some of these changes, you need more people from our communities to have seats at the table. And so that kind of just sparked my interest in more of the structural policy stuff.
And then at what point do you say, I'm not going to be a cop, I'm going to be a lawyer?
So again, I knew I wanted to go to law school. I was just I wanted to be realistic about it. And I applied only to UConn my last year of college. Wow. And I went through undergrad pretty quickly, so I was thinking about taking a little time off. I was worried about burning out. And I applied to UConn and got in. I was thrilled and decided to go straight through. So
then Erick Russell, then you made that last pivot. You went from criminal justice to
correct
corporate law and government finance. Tell me about that last pivot.
Yeah, so I everyone told me, so this was going into my second year of law school. Everyone said, I know you're not interested really in going to a law firm, but you should apply. And if you should go and you should get the experience, you're going to learn a lot and you're going to learn how to practice and you're going to build relationships. And I was fortunate enough to get for Pullman and Comley to hire me for a summer program. And I got there and it was just one of the most incredible experiences. All of the concerns that I had about being accepted and comfortable kind of went out the window pretty quickly. And I learned from a lot of really good lawyers and got experience in a number of our different practice groups. And it really opened up my eyes to kind of other areas of law that I feel like I could contribute in. So I started, when I got hired full-time, I started in our litigation group. I was doing some criminal defense work as well as commercial litigation, some probate work. And then transitioned from that into our government finance group.
And, often people, it's not as sexy to write about or read about, to be involved in things like how do you finance a government project? That's for people, right? It's our wealth and it's our future about how clean our water is or how our schools are built or how our roads are. And it's really great nuts and bolts experience to have for whatever you're going to do with it later.
Yeah, I love the work, and it's nice to see. Where I would get bogged down with litigation sometimes is you would have these cases that would drag on.
I know, and the
for
judge
5
can only hear
years.
you every few months,
and it's you go back and forth for 5 years, and at the end of the day, you're talking about a dollar amount of money that it's what the whole thing is over, right? And I just find this work to be really rewarding. That it's contributing to communities that we live and work in. And so for me, it just was a better fit overall. And I did a lot of tax work in law school, so it tied in some of the tax background as well.
Erick Russell, New Haven attorney on the move, rising star here on Dateline New Haven 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org at WNHH. You grew up in the Hill?
I did. So, bounced around a little bit. I was born on Dwight Street in New Haven, lived on Dixwell for a while, and then we moved to Front Street in Fairhaven.
Oh, when you had the store, you didn't live there. You lived in, okay.
Correct, yeah. So still spent probably most of my time on Congress Avenue.
And you went to Hill House?
I didn't. So I actually went to middle school and high school in West Haven. So we moved to West Haven shortly before I started middle school.
And that's why the West Haven Black Coalition was helping you.
Correct.
Now, a lot of people of talent, when they're young, they leave.
That's true.
You stayed. Why?
This is home for me. And I think, again, going back to representation and making sure people know that they have a path. I growing up, you oftentimes saw people that did make it out or that were successful or however you want to label it that never came back. And I feel like we have an obligation to make sure that people coming up under us know that there's a path. Senator Winfield, it's one of the things I've loved being a part of is welcoming students back because you matter campaign.
Yeah, he goes first day of school at Lincoln Bassett. You do that?
Oh yeah, it's been something since we started, and I get there as much as I can. But that's what it's all about: is these kids to see people from their community that look like them, that are doing incredibly well. That
dreaded word. Role model.
Role model.
Usually means someone steals a lot of money and then pretends that he's really on the up and up, but not in your case.
Yeah, don't lump me with that.
So, all right. So now you've also been very involved in politics and policy. You haven't given that up. So you're the Eastern Regional Vice Chairman of the Connecticut Democratic Party. First of all, I didn't know we were Eastern Connecticut. What's that?
No, so I serve as vice chair of the state Democratic Party.
Okay, I don't know where that. Except
and then the
info had that wrong.
No, so the Eastern Region role is in taking on the role of vice chair. There's also been involvement with the DNC, and there's an organization called the ASDC, which is the Association of State Democratic Committees, and I serve as vice chair of the Eastern Region of that organization, and it's really just about.
So you're very involved in politics. Now, when you were in City Point, weren't you involved in like the ward committee?
I was. Yep. So I was served as co-chair when I was in Ward 6.
And now you've gone to the state level. And am I wrong that the state Democratic Party's been doing a darn good job of getting younger people involved, people under 40?
That's really been the goal. We've made that a huge effort since Nancy and I took over.
Despite the fact that as your chairperson, you got someone over 70, but your other people are young. Jacqueline Coyson, isn't she on the staff?
Yep. Jacqueline is doing a fantastic job, and I think the party over time has worked really to make this an initiative, and Right now, we're working to build out all of our caucuses, which will also include a youth caucus where we're trying to pull younger people in. We also want to make sure that many other communities that are currently underrepresented in the party know that there is a place for them, and that we want everyone to have a voice within the party and to be included.
And we just had a generational change mayoral election, a 44-year-old mayor, first post-boomer mayor in a long time. Oh, there weren't boomers before. But also his campaign was run by someone like you who kind of came up in that younger wave of state Democratic
It's true. Yeah.
active people. Gage Frank, he's 28 or 7. And he was involved also with like some statewide Democratic groups recruiting younger people.
I think that's right. Yeah. No, I think you're seeing that across the board, is that more young folks are getting involved. And I think it's really important. I think a lot of these issues, as we're talking about them, are going to impact our generation and the generations after us more than anyone else. So I think it's important that we all have a seat at the table and know that our voices, lending our voices, is really important in the process.
My generation particularly, I just think there are so many of us and we're living longer than in healthier lives longer, have a hard time making those opportunities available to younger people moving over. I remember like a generation ago, even a lot of younger African-American activists in New Haven helped elect John Daniels. They were gone in a couple of years. They said that in both the black community and the community at large, there was no interest in making room for them to really take on responsibility. Has that changed?
I think so. I think that there's been real waves of involvement from young folks around specific issues that people have really started to see the power that young people can have in this process. And I think that benefits.
Ironically, we saw it with the Bernie Sanders campaign.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And I think around, I mean, if you look at a lot of the activist groups around ending gun violence, and a lot of these are driven by really young people because they're the ones that are ultimately being impacted by these more so than climate change.
And LGBT, my generation, so when my college graduation was 1982, and I wore a gay rights symbol on my gown. And I remember that was considered edgy. Like other students who were for gay rights did not feel comfortable doing that. And now so when gay marriage came up, I and everyone my age kind of thought, boy, that's a great dream one day. I mean, it's not going to happen in our lifetime, but let's move toward there. Then in 5 minutes it happened.
Yeah.
State Supreme Court in Massachusetts, then the whole country, the U.S. Supreme Court said it's legal. So I think your generation is helping us see possibilities that we couldn't see because we think the world works a certain way and how the world works changes.
It's true. I think that's right. I mean, but to be honest, I mean, growing up knowing that I was gay, I didn't think that marriage would be legal in my lifetime either. I think as I started to get older and see where things were moving and how people's perspectives were changing, it became a little bit more realistic. But I remember growing up, I never thought that I would be married. It was just not.
And are you married?
I am.
Oh, okay. When did you get married?
So I got married 2 years ago this past October.
To whom?
So my husband's Chris Liddy. He's from Newtown originally.
L-I-D-D-Y?
L-Y-D-D-Y. Yeah.
And so when you grew up, was it hard being known to be gay in the black community still? Because I know in my generation that was very hard, especially in the African-American community, especially if you went to church.
Yeah, so I wasn't out really until law school.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Even still, wow.
Yeah, it was, and for me it was.
Why was that?
It wasn't something that I necessarily, I guess I just didn't make a point to come out. I didn't necessarily change how I lived my life at all, but I wasn't.
Did you ever get harassed? Like, where's your girlfriend?
No. I mean, I'd never really had any issues there. So did people know
you were gay? You just didn't talk about it?
I think some did, but it wasn't it wasn't something that anyone really talked about openly.
And so now you've seen the world change fast, even in your life.
It's true. Yeah, it's very true.
It really shows that while we're in this moment of despair with what's happening nationally, I keep coming back to this one issue about how we don't have to be in despair because what you can't imagine changing for the better can imagine.
Yep.
The other thing was that, African-American president, we just, up until the day, even before Obama took the oath of office after we won, we all kind of believed it wasn't going to be allowed to happen. It was like, so now you're the chair of the LGBT task force of the State Bar Association?
No, so there's a LGBT section of the Connecticut Bar that I actually just came off as president. I was chair. I served 2 terms as chair. So we The LGBT.
Like, what do you do? Yeah, what's your mission there?
Yeah, so the LGBT section wasn't in existence until, I guess it's been 6 years now, and a colleague of mine served as the chair when the section was founded, and it was myself, and there were kind of a group of LGBT lawyers in the state that thought it was important to get this section up and running under the bar. So a lot of it is one, being a resource in mentoring other LGBT lawyers in the state and law students. Part of it is learning about issues that are impacting the LGBT community, and we have a lot of events around kind of hot button issues in the country that are impacting LGBT.
And what in your mentoring, do you see overlaps or big differences in how you mentor African American lawyers and aspiring lawyers to say you belong, and I've been there, here's what you got to face, and how, and LGBT aspiring lawyers and new lawyers?
I certainly think there's some overlap. I think one of the things that's been interesting is that there are more. I think there's more representation for LGBT lawyers in the state than there are for Black lawyers. So I think that some of those. I think there's been more progress in the LGBT community a lot.
And isn't that so interesting, because the issue was more acceptable in an open, broad way much more recently?
Yeah. I think the other hard part is that one of the challenges we have in Connecticut with Black lawyers is actually keeping people in the state.
Right.
And I think it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, in that people want to go somewhere and practice where they know they're going to be comfortable, and there are other people that look like them. And when you talk about some of the larger markets that we're kind of sandwiched in between, with New York and Boston, those legal communities tend to be, there's more representation for minority groups. And then there's always the kind of elephant in the room when we talk about some of this professional stuff, and that my generation is strapped with student loans. And there are a lot of people that coming out of law school, I think, especially from communities where oftentimes people are the first person in their family to go to college and didn't grow up with a lot of resources or have their family paying for school for them. They kind of are tied to taking a job that they can make where they can make more money. And then that oftentimes pushes people out of the state as well.
So would you fair to say that, first of all, I don't know how you sleep. I mean, I know that they make you bill hours at this law firm, and then you also are chairing 95 committees and going to 20 networking events a week. But is it fair to say the common thread is to give the message you belong?
I think that's certainly, I think it's certainly mentor. A huge piece of it. And to be fair, I work for a law firm that genuinely cares about the people who are there, and they care about things that are important to their attorneys. So I've always been supported in these things that I do outside of work in many ways. And I've never had anyone question where I am or what time, because they know that these things are important to me, and therefore it's important to them. And it's one of the reasons why I've been happy there for so long.
Erick Russell, New Haven, Dateline, New Haven, WNHH-FM, live stream, newhavenpen.org, 102.5 FM. So let's talk about this generational change election. Did you play? We just had a mayor election, as I mentioned. Did you play any role in that?
No. So we obviously were involved in elections all across the state as a party. Our rule was we were staying out of all of the primaries because we didn't want there to be any perception that the state party was influencing. Yeah, exactly. So obviously after the primary, as a party, we supported the Democratic candidates.
How'd you feel about it? Was it a generational change election? Am I right?
Sure. I mean, it certainly was. I think people were just ready for something different, and I don't think that's a negative towards Mayor Harp at all. I think we all know that
I just kind of felt that way too. I kind of felt like her people took it as a negative on her, and how could you not, because they're voting against her? But that times just change. And people want something else after a while.
Yeah, and I think this is part of it, right? This is part of our process. I think these primaries are always really challenging, and people get behind candidates and support candidates and feel very passionately about that, and it's always hard.
That's what I was talking with someone the other day, that she was on one side, someone else was on another, and saying we all think the world's going to end if the other side wins, and that like the world's going to be saved.
Because we're all invested. I mean, it's why New
Haven's a pretty good place, and it's going to remain that way,
For sure, and we're all, obviously, if you are involved enough that you're supporting candidates and you're out knocking doors, you care a lot about what you're doing. But the beauty of it is, I think we have these robust discussions and conversations, and we go through these processes. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately about moving our communities forward. And I think it's been great to see so many people come together after this. I think that'll continue to happen. And supporting Justin and knowing that his success is going to be the city's success. So,
and your success has continued. I wish you many successes. 10 years from now, where are you going to be? You going to run for office?
That's not my plan.
Your plan is not to run for office, because everyone would look at you and say, "Here's a guy who wants to run for office."
I don't have any plans to run for office. My thing has always been making contributions, and I'm happy to do that in any way that I can. But I don't think that you need to be elected in order to contribute.
Tell me about that. I would argue that the most important thing in New Haven is our civic sector. The people who care enough about the place to get involved and with other people to make it better or enjoy it. And then they become, I'm sure you're wooed by every politician for support or to deliver on stuff you'd like to see happen.
No, but again, I think that that's the important piece is working towards kind of what you want to see accomplished. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. I think everybody has their own role in it.
All right, Erick Russell, what a pleasure to be finding out about what you're up to, what you've been up to, and I hope you'll be back to tell us more as you're up to more.
I will. I appreciate you having me.
Congratulations on all those well-deserved awards.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to us today. Thanks to Young Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. Thanks to our guest, Erick Russell. Thanks to the Miracle Man back behind the controls after a diversion to Florida, WNHA station manager Harry Droz. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.